Hello Internet Land, this is the Mother Brain of the Mother Brain Files, and I'm here today to give you my movie review of the box office hit Looper, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Bruce Willis, and Emily Blunt. And I have to say, after seeing this film, which had a lot of rave reviews and very positive trailers to get my $12, $13 for my ticket, I gotta say, this was definitely one of the best films of 2012, hands down. This review might be a little bit spoilerish, so just beware. Turn this off right now if you haven't seen the film, because I might cover some things that you might be upset about. Looper was directed by Rian Johnson, who had done another classic cult film called Brick, which also starred Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And then he kind of stumbled with The Brothers Bloom right after that, but this film definitely brings him back. And I would have to say, if this film really does succeed everybody's expectations, expect Rian Johnson to become probably one of the next big filmmakers in Hollywood, probably up there with Christopher Nolan, the way this film had turned out for me. It takes place in the near future, in a very not post-apocalyptic future, but a time when everybody's kind of suffering and poverty is at an all-time high. And 30 years from that particular near future, time travel is invented, but it's also outlawed. And there are mafias in the future who cannot hide their dead bodies because everybody is tracked in the further distant future. So they have to send these dead guys back to basically get killed by loopers, these professional assassins working for the mafia in what's supposed to be like the 2030s. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is one of those particular assassins hired by the mob to kill these guys who get thrown back, and gets paid to do this. And every so often, some of these actual loopers have to kill their older versions of themselves, and they get paid to live the next 30 years of their life. For whatever reason, no questions asked. And it's also a specific future where, because of some mutations that have gone on, because of the environment, now you have psychics running around doing their little things, you know, making keys and all sorts of small objects float, which, you know, seems like a ridiculous thing in the beginning, but there is a payoff to this much later on. So Levitt's character ends up having to be forced to kill the older version of himself, played by Bruce Willis. And the older version of Levitt's character manages to evade his capture, basically, and therefore he's hunting him down, while at the same time Willis's character, who's the older version of Joseph Gordon-Levitt, is trying to find this character called the Rainmaker, who supposedly is closing all the loops in the far distant future, and also is controlling all the mafia syndicates in the future. And so Willis, who basically has had this new life as an older man, you know, he got away from drugs and, you know, the crime element, and basically had gotten married to a beautiful woman and lived a clean, legit life, is now trying to make sure that life stays intact by trying to find a Rainmaker as a young boy in the present, and trying to make sure that as long as the Rainmaker's dead, then my future is secure. But it's obviously not so easy. And of course Levitt's character would find a Rainmaker as a boy, but also being in the protection of Emily Blunt's character, who is, we don't know if she's the mother of the Rainmaker or some sort of foster mother, but she's basically like the Sarah Connor of the movie, trying to protect this young boy from getting killed. And of course we find out some little things here and there to really just twist up this whole premise. And what you think you see in the trailers, which is kind of like a Terminator type of film, actually has a lot more layers going on than it appears. The film overall had a combination of, as I said, all the great sci-fi films that come to mind in memory. Films like The Terminator, The Matrix, 12 Monkeys. I would even go as far as saying Time Cop, the anime classic Akira, and a little bit of Children of the Corn. You'll know what I mean when you see it. And basically, it took a lot of different ideas from these films and rolled them up into what's part Western, part sci-fi thriller, part, just full, all-out, badass action film. And it was just an incredible sight to see, and the things that Rian Johnson as a director was able to get away with was just unbelievable. As far as the performances go, I don't think there was really any particularly bad performances. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is obviously one of the best young actors working today. I think after Inception, and certainly having done The Dark Knight and films like The Lookout, and of course Brick, he has shown that he has evolved from the child actor from Angels in the Outfield and television star from Third Rock from the Sun, is now showing that he's really serious as a big-time movie star, and not finding himself in a lot of filth, but actually putting himself into quality stories. And in this case, he really does emulate a young Bruce Willis, down to the makeup, down to the mannerisms. And my dad kind of said he looked like George Burns, but I could kind of see that at times, the smugness that he had. But Levitt was amazing to watch, and the way he captured that role, and the sort of conflict that he had within himself was just mesmerizing to see. Like you say about Bruce is Bruce, but this time he doesn't look like he's going after a paycheck. Like, he actually gets into this role, and you probably see another different side of Bruce in this film. He's not John McClane in this movie. He's more like the character he played in 12 Monkeys, but maybe even slightly darker than that. And you'll know what I mean when you see it, because there's some very bold things that he did that are not so Hollywood in this film. Even though in the trailers it looks like typical Bruce Willis type of action movie. The most outstanding performance is the young boy who basically is the Rainmaker. I don't know too much about him other than the fact that he was on the show One Tree Hill and did a couple of episodes for that. But I gotta say, you have Haley Joel Osment with The Sixth Sense. I think this is just as good, if not better, than Haley Joel Osment's performance in that film. This kid, I don't know where they found him, who taught him, but he's gonna be probably as big as the girl who played the hit girl Chloe Moretz from Kick-Ass, because just for his age, what he was able to express through emotion and facial expressions and conveying that anger, it was just like, oh my God, this kid's from out of this world. So be on the lookout for him, because he probably might be up for an Oscar next year, the way that performance turned out. Rian Johnson is no Michael Bay, and that's a good thing, because he actually pulls the camera back. He shows you all the action. He takes his time with the action, and there's not a lot of shaky cam movement, none of that MTV nonsense, other than maybe with the editing. But he really crafts his story in a manner that you can follow it, and it's not dumb eye candy popcorn entertainment, but there's actually substance, a story to think about, characters that have layers to them. And I think through his writing and directing in this film, he really shows this is what Hollywood needs right now: a good story that takes its time and has something worth talking about after you leave the theater. I had to be shocked knowing that this film was rated R and not PG-13, because from the trailers it could have easily have been a PG-13 film, but this movie seems to go more back into those R-rated sci-fi films of the 80s that I love, especially the first Terminator. Not a whole hell of a lot of cursing, but certainly a lot of violent gore in this film, and a little bit of nudity too, some nice nudity, I would say. If Looper had any flaws, there really weren't that many. I would say the only thing that really stood out for me was there were times where some scenes ended too abruptly, and the transition between one scene to another kind of felt like we're just trying to speed things up to get through the rest of the running time. And sometimes I like when certain stories just play themselves out in a gradual manner, whereas in this case it seemed like you have your moments where it does that, and then other times where it's just like, okay, let's just cut and get to the next scene. I get the feeling it might have been a far longer film than it was, and Rian Johnson was forced to kind of cut it down to a solid 2 hours. But it doesn't hurt the film by too much, I would say. There are some times where you have some pretty cool action scenes, but Johnson tends to sort of either edit away or pull the camera back away from the action instead of letting it play out. And sometimes it's sort of like cheating the audience. Like, people do want to see Bruce Willis taking a machine gun and blasting 50 guys off screen. I know it's kind of 80-ish, but you know, people like to see that sort of thing even in a sci-fi film. But I felt like maybe there was too much of that. Maybe because that's what Rian Johnson expects. He expects the audience to think we're going to see a full action scene played out, and then it's just like, okay, we're going to turn the camera away so you can look at something else, like a dead henchman trying to get himself back up. I'm just going to flat out give it 4 stars. Definitely one of the best films I've seen this year. I recommend it to anybody who's a big fan of Levitt, who's a big fan of Willis, and who just wants a solid sci-fi film for this fall season. So if you haven't seen it already, check out Looper. I recommend you seeing it in the theaters. Don't wait for it on DVD or Blu-ray, because it's a pretty solid sight to see on a big screen. On behalf of Coast Blog, you can follow us at the Coast Blog and my Twitter page, MutterBrain830, and we'll see you back here on YouTube.